Our number 8 today is John Paul Jones, the father of the American naval supremacy. So,
the American Navy, he is the founder. He is the keel. He's the rudder. He is the everything about it.
he is everything.
He was always fascinated by the sea. He goes to the West Indies, captures several British merchant ships. He sails all the way up to Nova Scotia.
Yep.
Captures more British merchant ships, raided a fishing village and burned it to the ground because he wanted to deprive Britain of food for their sailors.
He's now fully committed to the cause. Ride or die, win or die. We are going to do this, and I'm either going to win the colonies their freedom, or I'm going to die trying. Welcome to the Republic Podcast, where history meets scrutiny and facts matter. Join Rob and Lou as they dive deep into the foundations of American democracy, dissect the laws that shape our lives, and challenge the narratives behind today's headlines. From forgotten chapters in the U.S. history to the legal truths they didn't teach you in school. This is your front row seat to get informed, unapologetic conversation. We have an American republic, if we can keep it. Now, let's get started.
That'd be funny.
Yeah.
Speaking of funny, we're back.
Hey, how's everyone? We're back. Oh my God.
Lou, my brother.
Rob, my brother. Here, wait. Okay, here you go. All right. Cheers.
Everyone out there.
Cheers, everyone out there. This is the Republic, If You Can Keep It podcast.
If you can keep it.
I'm Lou.
And I'm Rob.
And we're here to educate and entertain you in whatever we are dealing with today. So
we are dealing with always the ability and the wonderment to understand and appreciate this country. That's what this is all about. Now we get diverted. We go off on tangents. We do whatever.
No.
I know, it's crazy. But at the base of all of the stuff that we're doing, we want people to understand and appreciate our history, appreciate all the tenets, all of the writings, all of the foundational pieces. And this happens to be our list of founding fathers. The Lou and Rob list. And we're up to number 8.
Yeah. Yes. 8. 8. Yes. We are at number 8. And so who is number 8? You may ask, Lou, Rob, who is number 8?
Who's number 8?
8 is somebody. Nobody is somebody 8 where if this flag behind me doesn't sort of prove it. And just for everyone that any questions out there, this is not the Gadsden. This is the Navy Jack. And if you have to check it, check it. So with that being said, our number 8 today is John Paul Jones, the father of the American naval supremacy. So
the American Navy, he is the founder. He is the keel. He's the rudder. He is the everything about it.
He is everything.
So when we go through our top 10, and everyone out there, I'm sure, has been watching all of those, the countdown. The first half, you kind of say, we can see that. It's just kind of the standard. I hate to say standard, but it's so obvious that number 1's got to be George Washington. Right. Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, they're going to be up there.
The people you hear about all the time.
Right. But we wanted to make sure our top 10 list incorporated names and stories from the founding of this country that maybe some people are not as aware, but who yet are still as important and should be understood and learned about. So, like we did our collective on the list of having 4, because we wanted to honor the people who were on the boots on the ground for the Continental Army and militias. Now we're going into the water. And even though the Continental Navy, you may say, well, what did really they do? You'd be surprised. And we're going to surprise you with talking about John Paul Jones.
Right. But before we get to that, we want to thank everyone for your support. Thank everyone for continuing to log in and watch us, and ask you, like, share, subscribe. Make sure you continue to push it along. We're growing every day. We love hearing back from people. We love getting the comments. Continue that on. It's because of you that we can grow. And
Absolutely.
so on to now John Paul Jones. So Rob, why don't you tell us a little bit about John Paul Jones?
John Paul Jones. All right. John Paul Jones was originally born in Scotland, of all things. His father was a gardener on a large estate. He didn't want anything to do with it. He was always fascinated by the sea. He wanted to be in some sort of navy. He wanted to be in some sort of shipping. He wanted to be in some sort of naval commerce of some sort. And at the age of the ripe old age of 13 years old, 13. Jeez.
Right.
He signed on with a merchant ship at age 13.
Cabin boy.
And his enthusiasm and his understanding of mathematics, even at that age, really impressed the officers on the ship. And they actually started to teach him navigation, which in those days, the officers of ships didn't want to teach
anybody.
They didn't want to teach anyone on board anything about navigation because it was like the magic thing. Oh, don't worry, we'll get you there. And if they didn't know any better, that's just fine.
And there was no GPS, there was no Waze, there was no, I mean, going back for all you who may remember it, the old Loran, none of that even. Everything was celestial navigation and sight. And, and that people had to do it, the chart plotting, everything else. It was not something that was easy, but yet John Paul Jones took a shine to it.
He really took to this as he thought he would. He really blossomed. He loved being in the ships. He loved being on the sea. And he was given more and more latitude, not just some little kid who's supposed to be, scurrying about doing, do this for me, do that for me, go for runs.
Piss boy. Yeah, And if you know that reference, then here's
you were one of our people. He did a number of trips back and forth across the Atlantic. And actually, and here's a kid, he's a kid. He's in his teens at this point. He had been on a couple of different voyages of ships that carried enslaved people from Africa to the colonies.
Right.
And even as a teenager, he was repulsed by this. And he refused after, I think it was like his third trip. He's like, I can't do this anymore. I won't do this anymore.
Right. And just to sort of build on that, you have to understand that for these merchants back then, you sign on a contract and you have to, you're obligated. And if they can legally enforce it, where if you try to leave, they'll have somebody come and grab you and bring you back on here. So it's not like he signed on early. Few ships did, he was on normal ships, then slave trade, hated it, and found a way to get out and sign on with other ships.
Right. And this is well before there was a shot heard around the world in 1775. This is before there was even thoughts of independence. This is in the 1760s.
Right.
But for lack of a better way of saying, in 1768, which is terrible to say, he got his big shot because on a trip going from one side of the Atlantic to the other, the captain and the first mate, the only ones who were supposedly knew how to navigate, died aboard the ship called the John. And this kid, he was 20 or 21 years old at the time, says, I'll get us home. And he navigated the ship back to port. And the owners of the vessel were so impressed, they gave him a command of the ship.
Right.
Age 21. That's the kind of go-getter and intelligent kid this John Paul Jones was. But he had a reputation as being very, very strict. And there's a reason for that, because in those days, a lot of your crews were not, they weren't sourced by...
They're not pillars of society.
Yeah. They weren't sourced by, personnel managers and vetted. They were oftentimes the dregs who just wanted either to get off the street, either that or they were sentenced or enforced by certain jurisdictions and militaries and police officers. Sometimes they were themselves impressed into service. Mm-hmm. So not exactly the creme of the creme. So captains of vessels in those days often were very strict, as was John Paul Jones. And this got him into some little bit of trouble. So one time he's captaining a ship going to the West Indies. There was a mutiny of some, and John Paul Jones, put it down. The leader of the mutiny was a guy by the name of, I think it was Mungo. I forget
Yep.
the last name. And he got 25, 30, whatever lashes.
Lashes, yeah.
They get to dock, just bored. Everyone goes their own way. Mungo's like, I'm not sailing with John Paul Jones again. He goes on another boat. John Paul Jones returns his ship back to Scotland, where his base was, or wherever the ship's port was. Gets off the boat and is met by the constable saying, you're under arrest for murder, because evidently Mungo died on the return trip on the other boat, and his family sued John Paul Jones saying that his death was the result of all the lashes that he took. Long story short, he got out of that one. Had people, the old people on the first ship testified for him, the captain of the second ship. Mungo's ship came in. Long story short, but this would not be the first time, because shortly thereafter,
There's more.
And more, 1773, 1774, he's on another ship coming toward the West Indies, and there's another mutiny. People are pissed because on that ship, remember, there's no refrigeration. This is 1770, whatever the rations were that they were moving to the West Indies spoiled. And if
they weren't getting paid,
if the goods spoiled, you didn't get paid what you were supposed to get paid. And if you didn't get paid, your crew didn't get paid. Well, the crew wasn't having it. They tried to revolt. And there's John Paul Jones, who grabs a pistol and a sword. One of the mutineers rushes him. John Paul Jones, as it said, runs him through with his sword. And this time, John Paul Jones is like, I am not hanging around for the constable to show up.
Screw this. I'm out of here.
Gone.
Done.
So he gets off the ship and flees to Virginia because his brother had been there. And he changes his name because his original name was John Paul.
Right.
So now he changes his name to John Paul Jones.
Right. And that there was some benefactors that, after hearing his story and working with his brother and knowing his brother, were sensitive to it. So they basically allowed him to adopt their surname. So if there was any question, they would say, yes, we are aware he's part of our clan, to provide the coverage that he needed at that time.
Right. So he's in Virginia, and he eventually settled in Philadelphia. War breaks out, shot heard around the world, 1775. And he probably could have gotten a really lucrative gig being a privateer who just goes out and tries to sack whatever British merchant ships they can, and get whatever they could sell off it.
Corsair Army, the Corsair Navy, that kind of stuff, everything else.
Right. But instead, he wanted to get a commission in the Continental Navy, the new Continental Navy that was just coined, if you will, by the Continental Congress. And with the help of patronage from the Virginia delegate, Richard Henry Lee, who's the father of Light Horse Harry Lee, who we talked about last episode.
Right.
Connections everywhere.
Oh, big circle. Big circle.
Everywhere. Yeah. Sorry, had to do that.
Inside joke, but it's now outside anyway.
Anyway, so they were going to give him command of a ship called the Providence. And he said, I don't want that ship, because it was small and it had different kind of rigging that he was used to. So he became a first mate on another ship called the Alfred, did that for a bit. But come 1776, he starts stepping out, and he starts making a name for himself.
Now, just to sort of circle back and put this all in context. the Continental Navy wasn't one where like we're churning out ships now and we have shipyards that are building in specifically warships for us. The US, the Americas, the colonies didn't have that at the time. We were relying upon people that had their own ships that were basically turning them over to us, to the Continental Navy to become warships. So you have these large British warships specifically designed for war. They were the largest navy in the world at that time. Guns galore, large guns, small guns, that they had it. They were built to destroy. And here we have these smaller ships were basically the only reason why they had guns
We
on
got
them
the
at all.
hand-me-downs.
Right. The hand-me-downs was to basically defend themselves against privateers and pirates.
Right.
So it wasn't like anything that we have these huge ships now, where if you look at like the Constitution or stuff like that, I mean, the ships that we were sailing at the time were probably half that size, if that.
And when the Continental Navy was started, they commissioned two or three different ships, which weren't finished for 2 or 3 years.
Right.
So we were taking the hand-me-downs or wherever we could take them, these sloops, these little 2-mast, merchant ships, and trying to retrofit them into warships, put a couple of cannon here to the extent you could. It really was just, like I said, just getting the hand-me-downs. Anyway, so here's John Paul Jones. He's like, all
right,
I don't care.
Cool. Rock on.
Cool.
Right.
And he realized the error of his ways, and they offered him again the Providence as his own ship, and he took it. And on the Providence, I did in my research, he goes to Long Island under orders from the Continental Congress. He transports soldiers all over the place. He escorts merchant ships. He goes to the West Indies, captures several British merchant ships in this little boat, comparatively.
Steals their stuff.
He wreaks more havoc in the West Indies with British shipping down there. He sails all the way up to Nova Scotia.
Yep.
Captures more British merchant ships, raided a fishing village and burned it to the ground because he wanted to deprive Britain of food for their sailors. He destroyed the fishery there, took on other sailors, impressed his own, captured 16 fishing ships, 6 of which he took back to New England. So we appropriated them for ourselves, all in this little, the Providence sounded like, from what my reading was like, it was like a sloop.
Yeah. Right.
They retrofitted with like 5 or 6 cannons or 10 cannons at most. And he's going around all over, up and down North America, just like.
Well, I mean, I showed Rob this earlier, but here's a shirt. Fate,
there you go.
The Fearless. Because that's really what he was. He was one where along the same lines as far as what we had is a Swamp Fox and Light Horse and everybody else that we talked about in the last podcast. He was like, screw it, that we may not be able to win based solely upon firepower. So we're going to find a way. We're going to harass. We're going to shoot, retreat, circle, come back, and just keep doing this to the point where we either win or die. He was truly ride or die at this point for him.
Pretty much so. So again, this is his first commission as a Continental officer on his own ship. So he does all this stuff. He brings this fishing boats back to New England. He says, I'm not done yet, even though it's November. And November, for those people who don't know November in New England and north of it, it is cold as a,
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, I'm not done. Ice isn't blocking us yet. Let's go out. So he takes his ship and another ship, and they go back up towards Nova Scotia. Halfway, when he gets there, they've already take out 2 more British ships, and at that point, the commander of the other ship is like, I'm out.
Yeah.
And even though John Paul Jones decided, no, we're doing this, and we're going to do more raids, and he's like, no. And this is just foreshadowing, because this is going to be like the crux for him, and the cross he has to bear over the next couple of years, where other commanding officers on ships in his flotilla or navy, just his little group, just they go, I'm out. I can't do this.
Dude, nope. Too much for me.
John Paul Jones sees the other ship go. He's like, fine, I'll do it myself.
And he does.
And he does. So on the second trip up north, I'm looking through my notes, he captures another British transport ship, 3 British coal ships, destroys an oil warehouse, and then comes home. Like, really? No one else has been doing this. So here's John Paul Jones. And
I mean,
because
and this is,
go ahead.
No, I say, and you would think that to this point, it's like you've done enough, but in his own view, he's like, no, I haven't, because he's now fully committed to the cause. He has decided that I'm in this again, ride or die, win or die. We are going to do this, and I'm either going to win the colonies their freedom, or I'm going to die trying, and I'm going to do my best to try and die and dare them to try and take me out. And so he's doing all of this, but he has a bigger picture. What's that bigger picture?
Much bigger picture. So in October of 1776, the Continental Congress puts out basically what amounts to be a rating and a ranking system for people who should be given their own command of naval vessels. And he winds up 18 out of 24 because someone forgot to predate this, and they didn't know that he already had the command of the Providence beforehand, and it was a whole mess. So anyway, so he's kept out because there are other people ahead of him, and there's nothing he can do about it. So he's basically out for much of 1770, end of 76 into 77. And in 1777, he finally gets word from the Continental Congress, like, we want you to go to France. And he's like, I'm all in there, baby. Let's go.
It's like, wait, what? Awesome, dude.
So he winds up going out and sailing to France to get this one ship that's supposedly being built for them. The problem is, at this time, France is not declared war against England and England versus France. And England protests and says, you can't be giving this to our enemy and whatever. So France has to buy its own ship, and it becomes a whole political football, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Jones presses on. He goes to France. And ultimately, while he's there, and there's a lot to say here, but we're going to keep it kind of circumspect. So he finally gets a commission for a ship in France after doing a lot of political back and forth. And he is set with a certain ship, and that ship winds up being a problem with France, as I mentioned. He has to then he has to go get his own crew. And as we said, trying to find your crew is not like you're posting it on, Indeed.com and and vetting your people. You're scraping up people to get them to do what you want. Ultimately, he gets his crew. He goes out on a ship called the Ranger, and he does a little havoc. And he goes to Whitehaven, the raid on Whitehaven in England. Now, as Lou said before, remember, this is when the British Navy is the navy in the world. They are the power in the world. France had a navy then, too, which was pretty substantial. Spain had pretty good, but England was the thing. And no one would have thought that a ship could go into English waters and create havoc. But here's John Paul Jones. I'm going to do it. So he goes to Whitehaven, and in Whitehaven he has two longboats where he disembarks with 2 warring parties. They have plans. They're going to set 200 to 400 ships and other docked vessels in that harbor on fire. They want to spike cannons in the sentries booths and whatever. They want to just absolutely wreck the place, right? He's got it all set, and everyone's like, yeah, let's go.
But then
Well, they get there, they start burning the ships. They realize they don't have enough fuel to burn all of them. So one of the parties decides they're going to go to a tavern to find more fuel, but they find rum there instead, and they wind up getting drunk.
Like true sailors.
And John Paul Jones and his party is like, they're doing all the things themselves. Where is everyone? What the? And they realize a while later that, oh, the dudes are getting drunk. And this is the middle of the night. The alarm finally gets, like, oh, these people are burning our ships and whatever. They still manage to spike all the cannon in the harbor. They still manage to set fire to a good number of boats, and they get back to the ship. They returned. It was something that had never been done. Everyone on the English coast was just stunned beyond all get out. And then when they're leaving Whitehaven Harbor, here comes HMS Drake, which is a very large ship of the line.
Battleship. Right.
And I learned this when this was something interesting. Back in those days, when they say ship of the line, when English, whenever warships would do battle, they would form up in a line and then go pass by each other and fire on each other at close range as they go.
Boom. Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of strange, but that's what they did, which is why they call them ships of the line.
And it's along the same lines as, the old British warfare of, musket warfare. You line up in a line, firing line forward, bayonet rush, that kind of stuff. And so U.S. and especially John Paul Jones was having none of it.
There you go. Ultimately, John Paul Jones, if I remember correctly, he engages the Drake, and he's in this modified, and it's not as bad as the Providence was. What he has is a larger ship, and it's not quite just a sloop, but it's significantly outclassed by the Drake. Nonetheless, he takes out the Drake. He kills the captain. Their colors are struck. He takes that as a prize. And the crew now is like, well, wait a minute. We're not getting any money out of this. We want to be privateers. What we're going to do. So he has another plan. He's going to go and, because he's from the area, he wants to get the Earl of Selkirk, which is not that far from Whitehaven, evidently.
Right.
So he wants to go and grab and kidnap the Earl of Selkirk so that he can hold him for ransom and pay his crew. And the crew's like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Well, they land, they go to find out, and they were like, oh, the Earl of Selkirk, he's not home. And the crew is looking at John Paul Jones like, we need money, man. So John Paul Jones like, well, go to the house and take all the silver out of it. Like,
pillage the house, right?
So they do. They take the silver. Lady Selkirk, the wife of the Duke or Earl of Selkirk, she was pregnant at the time, and she didn't obviously put much of a fight. I think there's a story that after the war, John Paul Jones returned at least one piece of the silver to her with a handwritten note saying, sorry about that. We were
sorry, dude.
Sorry about anything. But anyway, he comes back to port. Oh my God, you did all this stuff. And look, you got the Drake and this, and he's now doing pretty well. But
there's still more.
There's still more because everyone's heard about the Bonhomme Richard.
Now, here's an interesting fact. Bonhomme Richard. You know who was named after?
Go on.
Benjamin Franklin and Poor Richard's Almanac.
That's right.
So if you want to go back to Benjamin Franklin and watch that, this all ties in because they named it after him because John Paul Jones was so enamored by Poor Richard's Almanac that he had this boat named after Poor Richard.
Now, when John Paul Jones came to France, there was still the American Commission there. And the Commission, as you will remember from Lou and Rob of prior pods, Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, and I got to think of the third one. I think it's Harry Lee. It might be the other one. Anyway, he fell in. John Paul Jones and Benjamin Franklin, they were tight. John Adams, not a big fan of John Paul Jones. There was a first mate of John Paul Jones when they first got to France who did some things that were kind of mutinous. John Paul Jones wanted him written up on charges, but the first mate was kind of related to Adams. He was also a fellow New Englander, and so there was a whole thing. But his adoration for Benjamin Franklin, he renamed his ship, which had been, I forget the name of the ship originally, to the Bonhomme Richard, Bonhomme Richard as we call it, to honor Benjamin Franklin and the poor Richard's Almanac. So
now, here's where it gets interesting.
This is where John Paul Jones really gets the name, and this is why, among other reasons, he's number 8 on our list. Because this ship that he has, again, is refitted. It's a former merchant ship. It's slow. It only has 40. They've retrofitted it with like 40 guns, but
Only 2 major
at
cannons.
least 3/4 of them are small cannon, which really don't do anything against other ships, especially British ships of the line. Right. He has, I think, from the research, he had 2 large cannon. I mean, like the real deal cannon on this ship. Right. 2. That's it. Of the 40, he's got pop guns and then he's got 2 real ones. Anyway, he goes off with they give him the Bonhomme Richard. There are 4 other ships in this little flotilla that go out who along the way all rather desert him. Like, we don't want to do, we want to do pirateers things. We want to go get money. We want to, and he's like, I want to cause havoc. And with that, fun fact, Lou and I were talking about this off camera. A lot of people don't know that in this time, this is 1779, France and England had declared war against each other because France had signed the Treaty of Alliance with the United States. France, unbeknownst to the colonies, had talked to Spain about doing a joint effort to invade the English Isles.
Giant armada, yeah.
With an armada. Well, as it turns out, France takes its ships to go meet the Spanish fleet in a Spanish port. The French don't pack the provisions that they ought to. And so a lot of their sailors who are sitting in port waiting for the Spanish to show up start getting scurvy. It's hot in the summer. Spanish fleet doesn't show up for whatever reason. I don't know if it was weather or whatever it was. They were 3 months late. 3 months.
3 months.
And by the time they get together, the French sailors are pretty well decimated. There's typhus and scurvy going through their ranks, but they still try to press on. But then the weather turns, and there's a couple other things. So ultimately, what would have been a great idea just gets scrapped. 8,000 sailors perished because of typhus and scurvy, and they didn't even do anything.
I mean, if anyone's ever seen the Blues Brothers, I couldn't help it. Earthquake. It's not my fault.
Locusts.
If you haven't seen it, watch it, and you'll understand. Locusts. But that's what it was. They couldn't, I mean, so they had the grand plan, and John Paul Jones is waiting there. He's like, let's do this. And he's waiting. And it's like, with his little, monocle, looking out there, trying to check to see, and nothing. So what does he end up doing?
With that as a background, John Paul Jones is going out with his 5 ships. What the French tell him to go, just, do this stuff. They want him to create a diversion. For the, in the background. And John Paul Jones has no idea about these armadas. Well, it didn't make a difference because John Paul Jones was like, I'm going, I'm doing this. So he goes out. And the crew that he had was a strange mix. He had sailors and Marines that some were French, some were colonial, some were impressed English. Imagine this, like you have English prisoners and you say, okay, you're good enough to come on my ship. What kind of loyalty do you think that's going to have? But that's neither here nor there. So the voyage that they started out on didn't really start out very well. The first day, a sailor fell from the rigging and fell what amounted to be like 2 stories or whatever it was, and almost hit John Paul Jones. He hit the deck right next to him and was killed instantly. And John Paul Jones just
flesh wound. It was
like,
only a
well,
flesh
let's
wound.
keep going. Anyway, there was some bit of mutineering that was going on. Some of the crew was being what they were. One of the other, the largest ship in their five ship flotilla was this French captain of 30 years who was basically kicked out of the French Navy because he was incompetent. Well, he just wanted to go out and be a privateer, and he wouldn't listen to anything that John Paul Jones said. So he said, I'm out. So he goes, takes a couple of the ships with him. So there's John Paul Jones hanging out on his own, doing his thing. So,
and then,
what's that?
No, I said, and then he comes up to where they finally get to that point, and he encounters who is the HMS Serapis.
So now we're talking about the naval battle that started it all, really, for the United States Navy. This is September of 1779. John Paul Jones has already tried to do a couple of raids on the Scottish coast of Leith. He tries to go in Edinburgh, and things are not looking real well because his other ships have gone out. He didn't do as much as he wanted to in these raids. Nothing really came of it. And he thought, oh, man, this is not good. Well, this is September 23rd, and he is out at sea, and there's the Serapis. The Serapis is a very, very large British naval warship of the line. It's escorting
three lines of gun. Yep.
It's escorting 44 merchant ships back from Scandinavia to England. It had at least 50 to 55, if I remember correctly, guns, all of them big.
Major guns. Against two major guns.
Not only that, it was a very quick, for its size, quick and nimble vessel. Whereas the Bonhomme Richard is not so fast. It's that jerry-rigged merchant ship with two guns of any real size. Anyway, well, there's John Paul Jones, and he sees the Serapis, and the Serapis winds up seeing John Paul Jones. John Paul Jones, well, I can't outrun him because this boat doesn't really go very fast. Well, roll up your sleeves. We're going in. It took them several hours because they see each other on the horizons, and it takes them 3 hours or something like that in order to line up because they're going to do the battle. And it wasn't until the afternoon that they started and they maneuvered into position. And the other ships in his little flotilla, they're gone. They're like, they scattered. They're like, you take this. We're not going to be any part of it. So
this is you, bro, not me.
That's right. And John Paul Jones, as it is said in this battle, he looks out through his little telescope, and he sees the captain of the Serapis nail the English colors to the mast so that no one could pull them down and say we're surrendering. So we know it's put up or shut up time. So what happens is a little bit of amazement. Here is John Paul Jones, who maneuvers his boat and organizes sharpshooters to go up into the riggings because he knows he's outgunned cannon-wise, but he's got some riflemen and French riflemen and some colonials, and they go up into the riggings. They go through the pass, and the ships are blowing the snot out of each other to the extent that the Bonhomme Richard had anything to do. One of the two guns that was supposed to be it blows up because it was.
Yeah.
So he's got one real gun. The other one is basically doing strafing and throwing grape shot, trying to take out anti-personnel. It's all anti-personnel measures. and the sharpshooters from the rigging are taking out people on the deck, which is effective. So they pass, they come back around. The John Paul Jones's boat, the ship, is just getting the snot kicked out of it. It's huge gaping holes. And finally, he realizes, you know what? My ship is starting to sink. I know what I got to do.
Right. Yeah. And so now, I mean, and just to put it in perspective again, as Rob was saying, these British warships are designed to take major cannon fire. The lumber on them are thick enough and designed to basically absorb rather than shatter. And so no matter what John Paul Jones could throw at him, it's not touching it. It's like, basically, fly, you're swatting a fly away on it. And so that's why John Paul Jones had to come up with a new strategy. And what was that strategy? That strategy is, well, I'm not going to be able to take you on by guns, so I'm turning my ship towards you and I'm ramming you.
Yep. So they go to ram, and while they're about to ram, the order given by John Paul Jones was to send grappling hooks to tie the boats together and then leap over and board the Serapis and go hand-to-hand combat. Well, the first time, the Serapis is able to outmaneuver. John Paul Jones comes in again. Meanwhile, all the cannons for the Serapis are ripping the hull out from under the Bonhomme Richard. They manage to do the grappling hooks. This time they're successful because all the riflemen in the riggings are really wreaking havoc with the personnel of the Serapis. And hand-to-hand combat starts. Now, Jones had struggled because he's all over the place and he's trying to do everything himself and try to help everything himself. He goes down below deck to help some of the cannon crews. And he had heard while he was down there, one of his men who had thought that John Paul Jones was dead. And he thought that the first mate was dead. So he heard that guy call for quarter, basically, stop shooting, we'll give up type of thing.
Nope.
Well, Captain Pearson of the Serapis heard the call for quarter and called out to confirm if they were surrendering, which leads to the famous quote of all time, where John Paul Jones says,
I have not yet begun to fight.
There you go.
And that's really what it was. So now at this point, the John Paul Jones was basically looking at this as a death spiral. I'm tying myself up to you, and we're both going to go down together. And so he has his riflemen up in the riggings, which are basically the original colonial army version of Marines. So you have, that's what they were called. They were called Marines, where their main job was not to be sailors, but to be riflemen. And so you have the riflemen coming down and sniping people from the riggings. Then you have the teams that are now boarding the ship and doing hand-to-hand combat, because they recognize that we cannot do this by a normal naval battle. So we're going to go hand-to-hand sword fights. The whole thing that you see from what is it? The Black Pearl and the Pirates of the Caribbean, that kind of stuff. All and it's all like that, and that they end up, John Paul Jones and his ragtag crew on this ship that has no business going up against the Serapis, ends up winning the day.
They took the day. They took the day ultimately, and the Bonhomme Richard, they had to
cut loose because it was sinking.
They cut the lines and let it sink because it was that badly damaged. John Paul Jones Jones takes the Serapis as a prize back to France. No one, it astonished everyone. It made, there were twofold effect, and this is why he's number 8 on the list. One was just the morale in France, like, oh, these Americans, holy crap, there's a reason why we're backing them. And when word got back to the colonies, such an amazing boost. No one thought anyone could take out a ship of the line, like a big ship in the line of Britain. The second thing, which is not talked about much, but it really is amazing, in my view, he is also responsible for the victory at Yorktown, because the British Navy, with all these raids that he was doing on the Scottish and English coasts, all the people were in England were petrified. They called him the Pirate Jones was loose, and they were all frantic about he was going to come burn their cities, their towns down. So in response, the British government had to retain in its home waters a significant percentage of their fleet, so as, especially after they heard about the failed plot with France and Spain to bring an armada in. But it was John Paul Jones really that freaked them out, and they said, we have to keep a fleet here to keep our people safe. Now, if that entire fleet had been able to go over to the colonies and wreak havoc, maybe the French wouldn't have carried the day outside of Yorktown. I don't know. But the simple fact is, a significant portion of the fleet had to stay in British waters because of John Paul Jones.
And it all ties in. It all ties in together, where the colonies recognize that they could not fight a conventional war against such a British force. Their land forces were huge. They were trained. They had been through battles with France and Spain and a number of other countries for centuries at this point. They had been battle honed and battle trained to the point where, who's gonna fight us? Their Navy is second to none. Their Navy controlled the seas at that time. And so for this, putting this all in perspective, for the colonial army to be harassing and winning in unconventional warfare, for the colonial navy to be winning it against Britain in an unconventional warfare type of setting, this is where America proved itself and really showed that, we're small, but we're wiry. We're wiry. We're not going to give up. We're going to fight. And that's how it was. They fought because they understood that their lives depended upon it, their freedom depended upon it. And so we're going to find some way to win. And John Paul Jones was the one that sort of showed that this could happen on the Navy realm.
And here's a Scottish kid who turns into an American hero, who believed in the principles that we were fighting for independence, for things that were expressed in the Declaration of Independence. So he went out and said, this means something. I'm going to do my part. And for the love of God, he sure did.
Yeah. And I mean, the unfortunate thing is that, after the war was over, he pretty much died in ignominy.
Yeah.
He lived for the sea. He was a true sailor. His entire life was on the sea, battling on the sea. That is what he lived for. And once the American Revolution was over, he sort of lost purpose. And he went back over to Europe after doing some, privateering and stuff like that over in the States. Now he went over to Europe. He fought as an admiral and got called in by Catherine the Great to become an admiral in the Russian Navy to help them out. But after a few years and seeing how really it wasn't what he expected, it wasn't what it was promised, he left that, and he actually died, as Rob and I talked about before we started filming. He died a pauper over in France.
Yep. And
it was only because after the war was over that people really recognized that the significance and the greatness that he brought, and how he really created the colonial navy and made it a recognized force. So that's when it was in the early 1900s that the U.S. really felt that they needed to pay the proper respect to their leading naval, naval leader. And so they went over to France. They started conducting investigations. They went through, and you have to understand that this is also after the French Revolution. So records as far as all this other kind of stuff were all gone. So they went through and they actually found what they believed to be his burial site, did forensic examination on it as much as they can at the time to match up the wounds and everything else, and then found him and moved him back over to the United States.
Yeah, they moved him back. It was after the Spanish-American War in
Right.
1898 that it was Admiral Dewey was like, we need, there's things about John Paul Jones, and they set up a huge commission. They did all the research, found him, as Lou said. He was disinterred and brought back with enormous fanfare. And his tomb, you can go visit in Annapolis, Maryland.
Right. And if anybody has a chance, I've had the privilege of going there on several occasions. It's truly amazing. I mean, it's something where he is placed in the position of dignity and honor that he really truly deserves.
Yes.
Because all throughout his career, he was always overlooked. He was always that person that was like, holy shit, this guy's got some weird ideas, but sure, let him do it. You know, he wants to go over to sail over to France and set up an American base over in France for us to be able to attack the British. Cool, bro. Let's do it. Go ahead. And nobody thought that he could accomplish what he did, but he did. And that's the thing that, you know, as we've talked to everybody, as we talked about all the people throughout all the leaders that we've discussed, all the way from Washington through the colonial army and up to this point, that they started from nothing and that they really made themselves because they believed in this cause. And John Paul Jones was one, again, he could have gone back at any point in time back over to Scotland and really established himself and set himself up as a master mariner and lived out his life comfortably. But he saw this and he believed in the cause and said, I'm going to make this work for the colonies because they deserve freedom.
Right.
And it was because of that firm belief that he was able to accomplish what he did, and why he's number 8, right? Number 8 on our list.
Number 8. So he's the man of the sea, as inscribed in his tomb in the marble. John Paul Jones, 1747 to 1792, U.S. Navy, 1775 to 1783. He gave our Navy its earliest traditions of heroism and victory. That's all I need to be said. Done.
Right.
Mic drop.
Mic drop, done. But if you have a chance, go see it. If you're ever in D.C., in that area, Annapolis area, please go visit it. It's something that is definitely worthwhile. I mean, you know.
And along those lines, I don't care where you are in the country, there are historical sites near you. It may not be revolutionary sites if you live in Montana or if you live in Missouri or something like that. If you're on the East Coast somewhere, there's something near. But do yourself a favor, go to the historical sites, go to museums, go to battlefields, go to wherever. There's a reason why these museums and battle sites and places of memory are cherished, because it serves a purpose to remember how and why this country became what it was and is.
Right.
Go to Annapolis, go everywhere, do your thing. And don't forget to watch more of Lou and Rob.
I was going to say, and it loops back in. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We appreciate your support. We appreciate you following us along this journey. I mean, Rob and I have said that we could have 20,000 followers. We could have 2. We're still going to do this because we love talking about our country. We love discussing it and trying to instill our true belief and our true faith in this country. We've said it before. We're not a perfect country in the history of the world. We are a young country, but we are always striving to be better. And that's what makes us the beacon of freedom across the world.
And with all due respect to any other country in the world, we're still the best country in the world that this world has seen. And don't let people divide you. We're here to help bring everyone together with a little bit of pride in our country, a little patriotism. Bang.
Bang. Done. Mic drop. And with that being said, thank you very much for your support. Thank you for coming along with this ride. John Paul Jones, number 8 on the list.
In the books.
Cheers, brother.
Cheers, my brother.
Cheers, everyone out there. Again, remember, this is the Republic Podcast. The Republic,
if you can keep it, and you should.
And we'll talk to you soon. Love you, brother.
Love you, my man.
Later.
Shut up and sit down.
Thanks for listening to the Republic, If You Can Keep It podcast. Join Rob and Lou in our next episode as we continue our riveting discussions on the most important topics affecting our great republic. Drop a line for topics you want to discuss, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time.